think without further ado, I'm going to call this debate to order. On the resolution, resolved, President Trump has bettered living conditions of the working class and should be reelected. Is there a speech in the affirmative?
Madam Chair, I have
Mr. Owinski. Great. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight, and I assure you the views that I express are heartfelt and my own. A little background. I come from a very large Polish-Italian family. How large? My mom had 8 brothers and sisters, and my dad had 21. These were Catholics with no sense of rhythm. And I will tell you that the vast majority of these folks are working class. They're union members, they're tradespeople, they get hourly wages, they own small businesses, and everybody that has one of those knows you're a working person. We drive pickup trucks, we belong to gun clubs, we hunt and fish, we go to sporting events, and we drink beer. And to give you an example of how working class people feel, I want to tell you about something that happened to me a week ago. President Trump gave a rally in Latrobe. Latrobe's a little down on its luck steel town of 8,000 people, used to be thriving, no longer, and he flew into the airport. I got there 7 hours before the speech, standing on hot concrete, and guess what? I didn't make it in, but I was in the overflow crowd with about 4,000 plus of my fellow members. If you think these numbers are crazy, when this debate's over, go look at the crowds up in Michigan tonight. The line was backed up 10 miles, and some people camped out the night before. They were working class people. They took a day off work to be there to celebrate their president because we love him. And why? Core issues. Number one, jobs. Working people want to work. President Trump, in his 3.5 years, has had some of the lowest unemployment in decades. And for specific groups, which are often targeted and said that, you know, he's not a supporter, he's had lowest African American unemployment since it's been recorded, lowest Hispanic, Latino, and Asian. So basically, this guy took on China, he took on NAFTA, he's bringing back manufacturing jobs. They are jobs, and that enables us to work, make money, pay taxes. Now, if you doubt this, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is a militant union area, always has been, one of the most militant in the country, and one of the most militant unions are the Boilermakers from downtown Pittsburgh. A week ago, they endorsed Donald Trump, and why? Because they know Trump's good for jobs. Second reason, working people like to retire. And guess what? The media loves to spin this story that the stock market's all about the rich and the elites and the powerful. That's hogwash. Working people have their retirement in one of two places, 401ks and pension funds from their unions. And guess where they're all invested? The stock market and mutual funds. When the stock market goes up, working people see a bright, shiny retirement, a chance to put their feet up. When it crashes, they see years more of labor at their older and tireder stages of their life. If you want to see an unhappy group, go to a union hall and the stock market's down. It may have been different when the companies paid the pensions and they didn't really care, but that day is gone. Third reason, safety and security. You don't see a lot of working class people out burning and looting and rioting. You know why? Because they're working. They just can't take months off at a time. And every working class person I know is appalled. We understand that there are legitimate social reasons to protest. This isn't about, well, we just don't agree with their principle. We just think that when they loot and burn and destroy businesses, guess what? They're not tearing down Twitter or Google or the New York Times. They're destroying working class jobs. They're destroying the underinsured businesses of working class people. Trump will actually put a stop to that once the folks in these areas ask for federal help. He's not going to go in before because it's their responsibility. It's their states and their cities. And last but not least, lower cost of living. Joe Biden has endorsed this insane Green New Deal. It's unworkable. It's not fiscally conservative. And working people know what it means. Taxes will go up. Cost of gas will go up. Cost of energy will go up. Cost of fuel will go up. And they'll pay for every dang bit of it. If you don't believe me, think of the most left person you know, Michael Moore. Michael Moore put out a fantastic documentary a few months ago called Planet of the Humans. And the most lefty guy on the planet who hates Trump's guts said the entire decade plus of the Obama administration's attempt to put trillions of dollars into renewable energies was a farce. Not only did it not work, It didn't contribute to the grid. It hurt the environment. Don't believe.
I'm gonna, you're a little over time. I'm gonna ask you to, you can finish your sentence. You do have to unmute though.
I'm sorry, I get excited. We really love Donald Trump. We think he's done a lot for working class people, and we're going to support him. And the way we went to these rallies, that's how we're going to the polls. That's what's going to happen. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I went over time. I apologize.
All right. No. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So I don't remember if I mentioned this during the intro, but just so you know, there's a 1 minute time limit on, you have 1 minute to ask a question and 1 minute to answer a question, just so we make sure and keep things moving. So I'd like to know, are there any questions for the speaker? And if so, raise your little blue Zoom hand. Let's go with Rose Sundermeyer. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, unmute, Rose.
Now,
There we
can
go.
you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry about that. I'd like to ask the previous speaker what his opinion is on the unemployment trends. If you look at the unemployment trend, it's actually been falling for quite a while before Trump took office. And while I understand that presidents get credit for what happens, some of it also depends on what happens on the previous watch.
All right.
Thank you for that question. And let me say this, let's really pay attention to trends. The trend during Trump's presidency skyrocketed. It got destroyed during COVID, and we can have another whole debate on whose fault that is. But if you look at just last month, more jobs were added in August than was anticipated by millions. In fact, Trump's unemployment rate in August was lower than Obama's without COVID. So I think those trends are important. And yes, economies go up and down and there are long cycles. I'm not saying that every last job is related to Donald Trump. But in the aggregate, if presidents get credit for what happens on their watch, we can't ignore that it went up dramatically. And the expectation is he can bring us out of this much, much faster than Joe Biden could ever imagine.
All right. Further questions? Mr. Stone, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, the speaker mentioned COVID, and we can't have another separate debate on that, but I wondered how you assess his response, how the speaker assesses the president's response to COVID, especially in light of the statistics that probably we've all seen comparing the American response to the European response.
All right.
Happy to answer that, and I'll give you my opinion, and I'll say this. Maybe we should have done what Sweden did, which was nothing. No masks and no shutdowns, and they're pulling out of it much faster. I think the reality is this. Everybody right now yowling about Trump lied, people died, and all that, which I find abhorrent. They did not have a better idea what to do than he did. Joe Biden didn't come out with a plan, and he till this day doesn't say what he would have done were he in, and 2020 hindsight is always perfect. I think the reality is it was somewhat unprecedented, and it's easy for everybody to sit around now and say, well, he should have done better, he should have done better. But some of the same people saying that were saying at the time, come to Chinatown and party, go out, enjoy yourself. And Trump cutting off travel to China, he's xenophobic. That's all washed away now as the blame game starts. I am not thrilled with Trump's response, but I don't know what he could have done better. And maybe he zigged when he should have zagged, but I think he was honorably doing what he thought was best at the time. That's my opinion.
Alrighty. Great. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for our very brave first speaker. Yes, very good. Alrighty. Is there a speech in the negative? Mr. Page, go ahead, unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes.
Okay, am I there, Speaker?
You're there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm in the Austin, Texas area. I live outside of Austin, and I'm a masonry contractor in the Austin area. And we always seem to kind of focus on what's prevalent in the news right now. I'm in direct competition with the undocumented workers that Trump claimed he was going to make disappear. I'm historically a Republican voter. I really always have been. I'm not sure about now. I'm still on the fence for a lot of reasons. But anyway, as a masonry contractor, I'm in the Texas construction business. And for the last 30 years, and this is my term I just made up, so you can attribute it to me, Texas is a systemic sanctuary state. We won't admit it. We won't go on Fox News and shout that to the heavens, but we're also known in the construction industry as being a low-wage state. That came around in maybe the late 1980s. I was a young Mason at the time, and I didn't know what right-to-work laws meant, but the new Republican government that's it's been the case for 40 years, first thing they did was create a right-to-work state. And I wasn't in the union long enough to know whether I loved it or hated it. I got my apprenticeship to the Bricklayers Union in Dallas, and there was a recession back in the late 70s, and they didn't have much work for me unless I was family. So anyway, I didn't get much relationship out of the union. So I've been non-union ever since the early 80s. Almost immediately, and this may have been a coincidence, undocumented workers came up from Mexico. I think it was kind of a perfect storm. NAFTA was a newly signed bill. National Home Builders, which is pretty much on everyone's 401k, Pulte Homes, KB Homes, all those guys came in and basically started booming the state at the request of Republican governors. Our governors have trotted all around the country begging California and New York and all these big companies to relocate to Texas. We have low taxes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so fast forward to today, I think this increase in employment, if there is, it's certainly in other industries, but I'm still looking at the same competition I've been watching for the last 30 years. And that's the undocumented immigrant, which I do not blame, because I would do the same thing. At some point in time, up until recent 10 years, it was a systemic acceptance of their presence here by everybody, red, blue, purple. I don't care what the political persuasion is. If you're having a home built, you look the other way when there are workers on the job. You're not the employer, and neither is the builder. The home builder's not the employer. So none of those people have a legal concern about who is building their house. And there's it's a subcontract type arrangement. It's not an employee type arrangement. And these guys have become sophisticated enough to be full-blown crews. They're not ditch diggers waiting on the corner looking for a job. These are concrete crews. They're framing crews, masonry crews. And I'm still looking at the same competition. If my bid is $20,000, there's somebody going to do it for 10 or 5. And that's always the way it's been ever since I've been in business for the last almost 30 years. And so the notion that Trump has somehow made all that go away is hogwash. And I'm still trying to figure out, well, what did he change? What did he change in my world? Because I'm still watching the same guys come in and buy supplies that I've been buying, and they go out and they do the work that I'm competing for. And it's just, maybe it's an assumption that he's made all that disappear and everybody's, got a chicken in every pot. But it's like, I can get all the work I want if I cut my prices in half or more. But that's not what we're supposed to be doing as American entrepreneurs. We're supposed to be growing businesses, and that was always the Republican way. And I'm getting a little bit irritated with that concept, because that's not what's happening. I still have to compete with Texas construction industry has already shown data that they estimate that 50%.
I'm going to ask you to go ahead and wrap up. I'll let you go a little long because it's so interesting, but yeah. And you just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Case in point, the Texas construction industry has put out data that's probably 2 or 3 years old now, last time I read it, but 50% of the Texas workforce in construction is said to be undocumented. If you take those guys away, that's going to leave a huge gap in labor that nobody's going to be able to fill anytime soon. And if you go by that number, you think, well, 50% those are jobs that Americans aren't taking. So we're kind of stuck.
I'm going to have to cut you off there. I'm so sorry. You can unmute yourself because I'm now going to take questions from the body.
Thank you, Madam.
Absolutely. And thank you. We're going to start with Joe Pratt.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask the Speaker if he thinks that Joe Biden administration would address this construction and illegal immigrant labor issue.
Madam Speaker, quite frankly, I don't think so. Not in my lifetime. I just don't think anything's fundamentally going to change. It's so ingrained in the consumer mindset. It's not a political thing anymore. It's a consumer expectation to pay what they're going to pay, and they already know what wages are assumed to be. So no, I don't think Joe Biden's going to do anything more than same rhetoric that I've heard from Trump. I just don't have that feeling.
All right. I'd like to take a question from Zach. Zach, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Oh, and Zach, just because I think you may not have been here for the intro, direct your question to me. So ask it like you're asking it to me.
Okay. Madam Speaker, I was kind of confused. I mean, he says that he is, doesn't think Trump's going to do any better, but he also says that Joe Biden is also not going to do any better. I guess my question is, does he not realize that it's the Democrats blocking Trump from building walls, from doing the defenses? Like, it's not Trump's fault. If it was up to him, we'd have probably 3 walls, with machine guns on them. So does he not realize it's the Democrats blocking him?
Okay.
Madam Speaker, this has been going on for 30 years. So any particular president is not giving me any expectation of what you should, the question expects me to answer. There's only a few miles of wall built, and we're not talking about people right now coming over. We're talking about people that have been here 30, 40 years that have established themselves in my industry, certainly, and other industries as well. So none of that was addressed, and it hasn't been because it's a very comfortable place to be for our governors to tout around the country that the Texas model economy is so strong. Well, that's probably true. We're probably in better shape than the Rust Belt was at one time. So I understand my counterparts up in Pennsylvania and Minnesota and all those union states are probably doing better now. At least that's what they tell me on my trade Facebook pages. But no, I don't think either president is going to be able to fundamentally change in a short order my situation.
All right. Very good. We'll take one more question from Sharon's iPhone. Sharon, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Madam Chair, I heard the speaker talk about jobs that no one else would take. And so my question is, does he really believe that if things were changed tomorrow, and I understand that there is a concern about illegal immigration in the United States, but does he really believe that if this situation flipped over tomorrow, that we would not have a workforce that could build, that we would not have, we could not develop a workforce that could do for the housing industry what those people who came here illegally did? That's my question.
All right.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for that question. That's a very poignant question, because in the short term, no, we would not have a workforce to fill that gap. And it's a catch-22, because it takes determination. If you want to learn a skill in the construction business, you have to commit yourself for 3 to 4 years of training. And I'm going to tell you, it's 105 degrees down here. And in the summertime, you can't pay people enough to work out here in the heat and do the work that we have to do. I mean, we have the brakes and all that stuff, but it's construction. We're building something out of nothing. And so there has to be a system of training that a young person like me, when I started, I was 18 years old and I wanted to be a mason. And I did everything I could, no matter what the obstacles, to become a mason. That workforce has not shown itself in the last 20 or 30 years. And believe me, I've made that opportunity available to several people.
I'm going to have to cut you off there. You can finish your sentence, though, if you want to. Sorry, I'm not trying to.
Okay, I understand. I'm passionate about this, but the whole idea about this conversation about Trump creating jobs, well, if my situation were expanded to the whole nation, more people would understand what we're dealing with. And it's not just me, but I'm just saying that in answer to the lady that asked the question, Madam Speaker, that would be a gap that would be 10 years in the making, in to fill that gap. There would be a need, and wages would be certainly offered to fill that need, but to create a workforce that's skilled in what we need the skills to do, it would take 5 years at the minimum.
All right, very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands from Mr. Page. Yes, very good.
Madam Speaker.
Absolutely, thank you. Also, I believe this is Mr. Page's first online debate, so we are very happy to see you here. And that may be true also for our next speaker. I'd like to ask for a speaker in the affirmative and call on Zach. Zach, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to go over what the first speaker said. David, he was talking about pensions versus 401k. I'm a factory worker. I was a steel worker. I was in the United Steelworkers Union. So when you're talking about workforce, workers, that's usually who people think about as me and my boys on the line. So we did have a pension. I worked for a family company forever, and we got bought out by a bigger company, and they came in and they said, we don't have the money to fund your pension anymore. We're going to have to change you guys to a 401k. You're a union, so we're going to let you vote, but we're just letting you know we're not going to fund this, and it might not be offered in the next contract, however that goes. So all the guys, oh yeah, 401k, that sounds great. I'm like, this is your own money. You know what I mean? 401k is your money. Pension is their money. Like he said, it doesn't matter if the stock market goes up or down. Usually your pension's kind of more guaranteed than a 401k in a way. And we got off of our pension. Everybody was happy about the 401k. And it's literally like probably 75% as good a retirement as the pension would have been So I don't see why people voted for it. They didn't understand, I guess, what was going on. Those big bonuses offered, one-time deals. And we came to find out that the $600,000 they saved by not giving us a pension, that one of the top CEOs got $1 million Christmas bonus. So they couldn't afford the 40 of us to have a pension, but he could have $1 million Christmas bonus, one man. I was, oh my gosh, the next union meeting, I literally stood on the table and 3 of my guys had tackled me and chased me around pretty much. Yeah. And I'm in the affirmative. I do think that Trump would do a better job for the American worker, only because I see the two political parties as like Bud and Bud Light. Both of them are terrible. Both of them are loaded with calories, but one's going to kill you a little bit slower. I think that the Democrats would absolutely be terrible for the working man. Like myself, if they raise minimum wage, my wages are not going to go up. So a loaf of bread on the shelf that a minimum wage worker has to put up there, hey, the price goes from $2 to $2.50. Did my wage go up? No, I get paid the same. So it's only going to really screw over, the middle class working man if they increase minimum wage, and if they let, all these things, they're all about the poor and helping the poor, but everybody's not poor. I mean, you're screwing over everybody in the middle by raising everybody up. You know what I mean? Supposedly raising everybody up. They say that, Trump didn't do a good job with the coronavirus, but I mean, that's one hell of a call. On one side, you've got, it doesn't seem like that bad of a virus. It's only really hurting the elderly. It's not that contagious, it seems. Should we shut down America? If we shut down America, then everybody's out of a job, the whole economy crashes, America's screwed over. I mean, that's a tough call, shut down America or not, and you don't really know what this thing even is. So I'm lucky that wasn't my call. I mean, that's one hell of a call, to shut down an entire country. It's never been done before. It's a historical precedent. So, I mean, I guess he made the right call with what he could. You know what I mean? It's hard to make those decisions. So it's easy for us in hindsight to look back and go, oh, he did bad. He didn't, whatever. Okay. Nick was saying, once again, that the Trump didn't stop illegals. No one's going to stop illegals. They're a cheap labor force. And as you said yourself, it's going to take 5 years for us to home grow our own labor force for that price. So no one's going to stop them. Trump's probably the closest one that will stop them by building the wall and all this stuff. So, I mean, if you're going to vote for someone who may do it, that's your guy. But if the Democrats keep blocking him, then yeah, it's not going to get done. No matter who it is, Obama, Clinton, Bush, Trump, whoever's in office, the other party's still going to stop them. Like right now, they're trying to pass this big stimulus package to give money back to the people. And both parties can't decide how much money to give back to the people. They both agree it should be done, but everybody wants their name on it. It was a Democrat bill. It was a Republican bill. So it's not getting done. It's been 4 months now. In closing, that's what I've got to say is that, would you rather have Bud or Bud Light?
I approve of all speeches that have beer metaphors. Well done.
Yeah.
All right. Are there questions for the speaker? Just a reminder for anybody who doesn't know, the way that you raise your hand, oh, I see some, good, is you go to the participants button, and then that'll open a window, and then at the bottom, there's a raise hand button. Let's go for your first question to Randy Liaz.
Yes, thanks. Does the speaker believe that working class people and small businesses would benefit from universal health care that doesn't depend on their employer to provide it?
All right, go ahead.
I would say that healthcare is a very complicated issue, number one. And number two, it should be up to you whether you want healthcare or not. Like, it's so expensive. I have a wife and 4 kids. If my company didn't help me out, I probably couldn't afford it. There's no such thing as universal healthcare. We're going to be paying for it either way. It's either going to be forced by tax money, or it's going to be, up to you to buy your own. And since we live in a capitalist society, it's really hard for me to sit back and say, yeah, the government should control everything. No, we're a capitalism. If you want healthcare, go get it. If you don't. Anybody can go to work, get a job, and have the employer, give you healthcare, and it's usually not too bad of a deal, if done right. Like I said, I couldn't afford it otherwise.
All right. Further questions. Kay Halperin. Go ahead and unmute. Mhm.
Actually, is it okay, Madam Speaker, to give a comment and related to something that the speaker said?
Not right now, unfortunately, but I'd love to hear it as a speech later.
Okay.
Also, if you want to, you can, there's a thing people do sometimes where they're like, here's my comment, what do you think? Or what does the speaker think? So if you want to sort of cheat, you can do that.
Okay. I thought the speaker made a very interesting point about pensions versus 401k. And actually, my personal experience with that as a federal, part of the federal workforce, is that under a Republican president, Ronald Reagan, we actually, the ratio of pension to 401k or its equivalent, the federal government has something called TSP, Thrift Savings Plan, but it's like a 401k, where it's your own money invested. So under a Republican president, the amount that we got as pension was drastically cut back, and we now have to rely, this happened in the mid 80s during Reagan, and we now have to rely much more on the 401k, investing our own money. And so I guess I can ask, what does the speaker think of that? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Zach, go ahead.
Well, when the government faces large deficits, as Reagan had record deficits for his time, he was trying to build up the military. And I do believe, yeah, he did, do some cost cutting and stuff like that. It's unfortunate that has to go to 401ks, and pensions and stuff, but that's what you get when you work for the government. You never know what's going to happen. Like here in October, the government's going to shut down again, and all those government workers are not going to get paid again, so the government job used to be a nice, juicy, guaranteed jobs, but they don't seem to be anymore because the government just doesn't work.
Alrighty. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right. Jazz hands for Zach. Thank you so much. Alrighty. I'd now like to ask for a speech in the negative from Ms. Arlene Grant. Ms. Grant, go ahead and unmute yourself. Yep.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair, and to those who've assembled and to the prior speakers. I am in the affirmative because I feel that conservative values and moral values and social values have been ignored by the current administration to that adversely impact not only the working person, the working class, but every class and every fraction of our society. I believe that having represented labor unions and having been involved in mediating and arbitrating cases involving government workers to private industry workers, that there is a failure in the current administration to take in consideration how best to serve the working class and to do so with class. I believe that the current pandemic, which has decimated aspects of the economy, and then we have money that's manufactured to raise the appearance of having a more stable economy, doesn't work. I'm a student of economics before law and business, and I would tell you that making money, manufacturing it, not having it built and tied to the stability of the country is not working, and it's not working for us globally. Our global position is worsened, and that impacts the working person as well. When the cost of goods go up, there was a prior speaker to mention that if the minimum wage goes up, that $2 or 50 cent increase in the price of bread to make it $2.50 is going to impact the person who's not getting the raise. But the reality is that when you reduce money that's going into the pockets because you're reducing the stability of the economy, everybody's impacted. Everybody's paying more. And more often than not, that minimal wage that's minimally raised is not in any way making their lives more secure. There are people who are in food lines getting food. There's World Central Kitchen that is having to feed people. I've seen it with my eyes, not just in the news. I actually help communities and I watch and I see what's going on. So it's not just from the media. A prior speaker spoke about maybe we could have approached this as Sweden did, to not have any lockdown and try to approach the herd immunity, which we know does not work. Sweden has the worst record in its region with ratio for COVID deaths. Now their population is a fraction. I think we're over 2,000 times the size of Sweden, but that doesn't make it more realistic to say that was a better approach. It was not. It's right behind the US in the amount of deaths. And I would say that of the 190,000 plus documented deaths that we've had from the COVID, most of those were working class people who were impacted by that. So would the families that depended on those working class people say that they're in a better position? No. The reality is that we knew COVID presented a threat prior to December, when it was at least being released from China that there was an issue. They had intel from back in October saying there was something going on in China, so they knew that there was a concern. The idea is that we've had a cycle in society about every 100 years where there are pandemics or these types of flus or things that happen. And a good president creates a plan, a contingency. And there was one that was in effect. There was an Office of Pandemic, which was dismantled by the current administration. So to say that it was something that we couldn't foresee, it's not exactly accurate. It was something that you could plan for. We're supposed to be proactive as leaders, not reactive as leaders. And that's the problem. With respect to the border, I actually volunteer and help immigrants.
And you're at time, so you can finish up, but maybe not start a whole new point. Go ahead and unmute.
Okay, so just finishing up on the issue of immigration impacting the U.S. economy. There are U.S. workers who don't want to work for the same wage. So growing a crop of employees to work at a specific pay rate, I'm not persuaded that that is going to work. It's something that's been a problem for many, many years. And I would tell you that the costs of detaining people who come illegally seeking asylum and putting them in jail type hotels and centers actually impacts the working person as well. So I would say no.
All righty, very good. Are there questions for the speaker? Mr. Owinski, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Madam Chair, I want to thank the speaker for her insights, but I would like to ask on her assertion that the majority of the people that died from COVID died, they were working class people, that families were depending upon them. The statistics I just checked, accurate as of today, show that 81% of the deaths were over the age of 65. And between 55 and 65 was 4%. And after that, it drops off to less than 1%. The median age of death from COVID is actually 79, which is actually the median age for death without COVID. How can we say that when 81% of the people died that were over 65, that these were working class people that families were depending upon? Because the statistics do not bear that out. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you for the speaker's question. And I disagree with that statistic that's been raised. Further, to be of a certain age, 65 or older, the average American is not retired at the age of 65 or over any longer. That's no longer true. These were working people. They weren't just people that were laying in a hospital bed waiting to make their exit. They were people who were thriving and having viable lives. So I don't discount the value of their life and their contribution to society, and the fact that the failure to lead resulted in their demise.
All right. Further questions? All right. It's possible she's stumped the rest of you. Maybe y'all just agree, that's fine if so. Mr. Stone, go ahead. There we are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The previous speakers mentioned that the president has done policies that were very favorable job-wise to working class families. What do you say to that?
What does she say?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Sorry.
No worries. All right.
I'm sorry, could the speaker repeat the question? There was a part of it I did not hear.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, the previous couple of speakers have said that President Trump has implemented policies. One was that he took on China and other policies that were favorable to job creation, that the figures on unemployment and job creation were in some way tied to something that President Trump did, as opposed to just simply, that's where our economy is. What is your assessment of that?
What is her assessment?
What is her assessment of that? I'm sorry. Sorry.
Thank you to the speaker. Thank you, Madam Chair. The assessment is this. When you are dealing with economics, there is a progression. And so when you come into a new position, say the office of president, as that's what we're discussing, that day, you are the beneficiary of your previous administration. And that benefit continues throughout the course of your work. So you had an administration in place for 8 years that was doing a job. It doesn't end, the benefits of that job of 8 years does not end on the day that they are no longer in office. It continues because government is a system with checks and balances and processes that are implemented. So we were following in a particular progression. There were decisions that were made that have impacted our ability to maintain that same level of efficiency. And that's what we're seeing now. So we're seeing the true work of the current administration now, and we saw the benefits inherited by the current administration previously.
All righty. Very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for our speaker. Also, just so y'all know, usually we have more questions than we have time for. And so if you're one of the folks who had a question and didn't get to ask it, just raise your hand next time. And we will get to, I typically take about 2 questions in between speeches just to keep things moving. And remember that if you have a really important point, it can also go into a speech. So that is the end of our planned out speeches for the evening. And so I'd now just like to open it up. We're gonna go to 3-minute speeches, and I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. All right. I think Sharon, labeled Sharon's iPhone, is still there?
Hi, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute myself, Madam Speaker.
Oh, great.
Madam Speaker, I would like to speak in the affirmative. And the reason that I do that is that I have looked at the pieces of the Democratic platform for the coming administration, and I have serious concerns. I've been doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of studying on what socialism really is and how the socialist system really works. And I have concerns about a planned economy for our country. I have concerns about the loss of independence when power will be centralized, especially with things like the healthcare system, because it is, as we say, and has been said, nothing is free. And for the folks who think that there is going to be free this and free that, the question is, who do you suppose is going to pay for it if we don't all pay for it? And if the cost doesn't trickle all the way down to the people that you think you are helping, someone has to pay. And I don't think that just taking money from the people who have the most money will do it, because that isn't what Sweden did. That isn't what the Norwegian people did. They taxed everyone. And so unless everyone is willing to get in line and stop looking for their freebies, it's not going to work. And then the other side of that is having to wait. The amount of time that it would take to wait for particular, let's say, operations or procedures, that the socialist system causes backlogs that we don't necessarily have here, because you're free to choose who your doctor is going to be. You're free to choose who the specialist is going to be, and you pay for it. And so for those reasons, I can't support a negative view, because I don't think that it's going to be in the best interest of the nation. Thank you.
All right, very good. Are there questions for the lady? Mr. Reeves, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the previous speaker, and in light of her speech, I would like to ask the previous speaker, what does she think about Medicare for all?
All right.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the question. I don't support Medicare for all, for the reasons that I've just said, is that unless we're all going to pay for it, and we're all going to pay the same price, I'm not for it, because nothing's free. And so unless there's something in this plan that I don't know about, where everybody is going to have to pay Medicare premiums and pay for their Medicare benefits, I don't support that either.
All right. Further questions? Len, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Madam Speaker. I think it isn't it
good job.
true that that Biden's plan is not socialized insurance, let alone socialized medicine. It's a plan to have, a continuation of so-called Obamacare, ACA, which is similar to what Germany does rather than Denmark, where you have private insurance. You have a what do they call it, a pool or whatever, a marketplace of private insurers that you choose from. So it's not a question of socialized medicine. And that, Biden has been around as vice president and a senator for, over a quarter of a century or more, and has never been a proponent of socialism.
All right.
May I speak, Madam Speaker?
You betcha.
That may be true, that Mr. Biden has been the vice president, that he's been the senator for many years. And so I understand what you're saying when you say that he has one, can you hear me?
Yeah, I was just saying,
okay,
the third person thing.
I'm sorry.
You understand what he's saying? Yep.
I understand what he's saying, Madam Chair. However, what the platform says is something else. And so that is my concern. And as far as we're concerned about the Affordable Care Plan, it was, if you like your doctor, you can keep them. But everybody fell off their plan. They lost their doctors. The price of their healthcare went up. And so it needed, the Affordable Care Plan needed some help, and it still needs some help. But I don't know that Medicare for all is something that I would support. Thank you.
Alrighty, very good. And with that, our speaker is thanked. Jazz hands, Miss Sharon. Yeah. Alrighty. I am now looking for a speech in the negative. So go ahead and raise your little blue hand if you'd like to speak. We're going to go with Chip Treen. Chip, go ahead.
All right, thanks. This is the first time I've spoken in one of these.
Welcome.
So I have way too much to say, and I'll try to go through it fairly quickly. Trump speaks the language of the working class. He speaks it eloquently and well. He acts like he's a working class person. But I would suggest to all of you that he's kind of like a sheep in wolf's, or a wolf in sheep's clothing. He says he's for the working class, but he's really part of the deep state that he claims to be against. If you look at what he really is doing, not what he says he's doing, you would discover that he's not very much for the working class at all, but he's for the deep state and the people who make a lot of money. Jobs is mentioned often as a big thing in Trump's favor. I'd suggest that jobs came, as the other speaker suggested, inherited from the previous administration from a really good economy. Previous administration had a mess, it got cleaned up, and Trump inherited it, and of course the market kept on going. What he really did was pass a tax cut, which went to a lot of people who didn't really need the money. And so that juiced up the stock market, which is why everybody's stock market returns are really good right now, because that's what he did. But in terms of how he's helping working people with jobs, he's against family leave, he's against child care, and most of all, he's against health care, because he does not support and has tried to wreck whatever healthcare system we have. He doesn't believe in Medicare, which has saved seniors tons of stuff, and he's tried to gut the Affordable Care Act. So I just don't think he's very much in favor of working class people. I want to address the question about retirement. The original speaker and myself are very fortunate to have pensions, but most of the workforce does not. And so those people are really struggling. And so minimum wage would help them a lot, but the Republicans and the Trump are against that also. That is not pro-working class, even though it sounds like it just doesn't really help. Safety and security. This is one of my favorite topics. It starts at the top. How many Trump administration people have been indicted or put in prison for malfeasance, corruption, and chaos? This is the most chaotic, corrupt administration we have had in many, many years. And he can't appoint people. People leave, they come, they go. He thrives on chaos. That is not what we need in our government. It just doesn't work. And that's why the government isn't working very well, because he employs incompetent people who are political hacks, don't really care about anything except whether Trump gets reelected. So I don't.
I ask you to wrap up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and finish up. Sorry, you've got to unmute again.
And
there we go.
Thing. I just quickly mentioned Ebola and H1N1. Hardly remembered those, right? Hardly a ripple. That's how it's dealt with, so hardly anybody knows about it. Trump was far worse, and I just think he says one thing and does another, and I think the working class has really suffered from him and not been helped.
Alrighty. Are there questions for the speaker? I see some eager beavers. Mary Jo, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry, Madam Chairperson.
Whatever, it's fine.
I would like to ask the speaker, we've had a lot of discussion here about the number of jobs created, but very little about the type of jobs and income disparity. And I was wondering if the speaker had any thoughts on that.
All right.
Sure. Just like I said, the tax cuts went to people who have a lot of money. I do volunteer tax returns, and so I can tell you that most of the people got very modest tax cuts, and the most of it went to people who have a lot of money, and people who are able to itemize can't itemize anymore, so that hurt them too. So I think an income gap has been dramatically increased, and that problem's made far worse by the tax cuts that the Trump administration and the Republicans passed.
All right, and Mr. Kingery. Still muted.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask, or Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the Speaker, on the tax cuts, yes, the overwhelming amount of money went to the upper income, but we have a system in the US where the taxes are extremely progressive. So if you give an even tax break, percentage-wise across the board, the vast majority of the money will go to the upper income. I'd like to ask the Speaker if he is, or excuse me, I'd like you to ask the Speaker if he is aware that the US tax code is actually more progressive with the tax cuts that went in place than it was before. In other words, the higher income people are paying a higher percentage of the tax. Thank you.
All right.
Actually, our tax code is much less progressive than it used to be. Up until Ronald Reagan came into office, the marginal tax rate was something like 70 or 80%. Now we're arguing about whether it's in the low 30s or high 30s. So I don't think that that argument that there is more progressive, and maybe incrementally slightly more progressive than it was one increment before, but in general, the tax rate or the progressivity is far worse than it was. Warren Buffett said it really well when he said he's paying a lower percentage of his income for tax than the average than his secretary. I mean, that's just the fact.
Alrighty. And with that, our speaker is thanked. Jazz hands from Mr. Treen. Lovely. Alrighty. I am now looking for a speech in the affirmative. And I think we will go with a second speech by Zach.
Hi, I said I
Hello
would
again.
go last. If nobody else was, wanting to go in the affirmative, then I will go ahead and go. So, a lot of people are talking about, taxes and stuff like that. And as someone, a steel worker and a father of four, so it's 6 of us. I don't feel like I'm super highly taxed. It seems like everything's fair and balanced. Although it is interesting that they take it out weekly. You know what I mean? Every time I get a paycheck, they already have taken it right off the top of my check, and I don't even notice it every week. Oh, I make, $700 a week or whatever it is. No, I really make $1,000 a week. It's just by the time it gets to me, it's only $700. So if you are, the whole prompt of this is whether Trump will be better or not. And I think that Trump would probably try to help out, people in the middle more for the tax breaks. He's already upped the child tax credit, but I think that Republicans or Democrats would both do that. I don't think that taxes is something that Trump or Biden is going to change. Everybody wants to help out the poor, help out the middle class. So I don't see how Trump's going to, go the other way and make it screw over the, the little people or whatever, because that's where most of the votes come from. So I think that this is a moot point on both sides. That's really all I want to say, is that, there's no reason to argue about stuff. It's not going to change. Both parties agree on the tax code pretty much and how it is, and both parties pretend like they're for the working man, and they're going to keep, oh, we're going to child tax credit and lower the lowest rate even more and stuff like that. I got a few friends who got more back than they paid in. That had more kids than me, I guess, or something. I don't know, but they were like telling me that they paid $8,000 in and got $10,000 out, and I was like, whoa. So, I mean, obviously, it's not too skewed. I don't know how much Amazon has paid, but I don't really think that Biden or Trump is going to increase it very much. And if we keep increasing, taxes on the super rich and all the super corporate, the corporates, then they're just going to leave America. They're all going to go to China like they already are. So let's not keep pretending we're going to tax the rich, because we can't. The rich is who makes jobs. So That's pretty much all I really had to say, is that it's a moot point. No one's going to do nothing about the tax code. Either way, both parties are going to do the exact same thing, so it's not something,
So it's all Bud Light. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all Bud
Yeah.
Light in that issue. There's no,
Okay.
I'm going to support the poor, and the other one's like, I'm going to support the rich. Nobody is saying they're going to support the rich, because if they did, they'd never win again. So.
Alrighty. Are there questions for the speaker? I see one from our friend, Miss Sharon. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Sharon.
So, Madam Speaker, I have a question for Zach, and it's this: who is Vice President Biden talking to then when he says, when I get into office, I am going to raise your taxes? Who is he talking to? Because when he says that, and he doesn't specify per se, I think he's talking to me. Are you suggesting that he's not talking to me?
Right. Is he suggesting? But go ahead.
Madam Speaker, I think that is an excellent question. It does seem like the Democrats are more in favor of socializing the nation and taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor, or taking it from everybody, like socialized Medicare. Let's take money from everybody and take the government's little skim off the top and then give it back out to everybody. It's like that's not how it works. Why would you skim some off the top and then give it back? If I give you $1 and you give me back 90 cents, I don't see how that's going to be, an even playing. Or I think that when Joe Biden says that both the president and Joe Biden are not very good at keeping their mouth, closed. They're not really good at keeping their hands to themselves in some cases. I think that, if everything's on a camera now, you know what I mean? So if someone's walking down the street and they're talking to somebody, it's all picked up. It's a live mic. Everybody's got a hot mic nowadays. So an off comment by Biden saying, I'm going to raise everybody's taxes, or an off comment by Trump saying, I'm going to, deport all the illegals, or, whatever his off comments are, about women or about whatever. I mean, everybody's on a hot mic. So if they're saying something, a comment like that, it's not something that's probably going to get done. If he really wanted to raise taxes, then I think that it would be blocked by the Republicans and won't get done. Just like Trump's wall, not going to get done. So it doesn't matter what he says.
Very good. And let's go to Timberly Piersley. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi. I just am curious in terms of, people keep talking about the raising the tax rate on whichever group and relative tax rate for the different groups. But I'm concerned and curious about people's perspective and the in terms of loopholes and tax breaks and forgiven taxes, because it seems to be pretty significant if a tax break is given to a corporation or a person who is super wealthy. That makes a huge difference versus whether they're well, I don't know in terms of the tax brackets and that sort of thing, but it's just, it seems they're enticed with tax breaks and with loopholes. And I just like people's perspective on that. So I'd like the speaker's perspective on that. Sorry, I'm nervous talking.
You did great. Yeah, it's a good question. All right, Zach.
I think that there's two ways to look at that. I think if you're talking about, taxing corporations, taxing the rich, they're just going to hide their money somewhere else. They're just going to go to another country. Do you want them to close down my steel plant and make more steel in China, India? There's one aluminum plant in all of the United States. One aluminum plant. Most of our aluminum is imported. So if you tax that last aluminum plant, now we're going to have no aluminum plants. And then in the military, when we go to war with China, and we got to build tanks and planes and things, all requires aluminum. who are we going to buy it from? The Chinese aren't going to sell us aluminum to fight themselves. So if you're talking about taxing corporate America, they're just going to hide the money. They're just going to go somewhere else. If you're talking about loopholes, yes, that's, you know, the best corporations, the multimillionaires, they have the best lawyers. So they're going to find the best loopholes. They're going to hide money. They're going to invest it. They're going to say, oh, that's non-taxable. This is for charity. I mean, a lot of people, you know, go into office with almost nothing, like the Clintons and Obama, and they come out super uber millionaires. And politics seems to be a good way to hide your money, to start foundations, to hide, you know, whatever Swiss bank accounts, you know. The rich are always going to find loopholes. That's how they stay rich.
Alrighty. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for our, that's your first time, second speaker. Anyway, yeah, very good. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. And let's go with Mr. Liaz. Randy, go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. First, I want to mention an area of agreement with the previous speaker. Both sides believe that the other side votes against their interests. And I think that we need to recognize our blind spot in this regard, because it's generally a little bit of an exaggeration. So I think we should give each other a little slack on that. But, you know, a previous speaker said that working class people, for example, are not the ones out rioting. I don't know where that speaker got that conclusion. I don't know how it's possible to really be sure about that. But the people who are protesting in the streets are doing it for a community that has been marginalized and is very often, more often, part of the working class. So, you know, I definitely support them. In terms of the tax cuts, the vast majority of the benefits from that tax cut went to corporations and people making over $200,000. And when someone suggested that we have a more progressive tax system now, that doesn't really take into account the corporate tax cut that happened. Amazon still paid less than $0 in taxes in 2018. They got a refund of $129 million off of an income of $11 billion. And that's a problem. And it boils down to money in politics, which is something that we absolutely need to fix. And I don't think that President Trump is the one who really wants to do that. And I don't think it's a reasonable argument to say that since they're not going to pay their taxes, that we shouldn't tax them more. We should figure out a way to repatriate those funds and be able to tax them and be able to make them pay for the benefits that they get from existing in a country that gives them so much. Trump is also pushing a payroll tax cut that will defund Social Security, which I don't think is good for working class people. And I absolutely believe so strongly that the working class and small businesses on which they depend would benefit hugely from moving to universal health care that doesn't depend on their employers, so they can have more stability and they can leave a bad job without risking that stability for their families, and thereby get more power in terms of what they can charge for their labor. I think that's really important. And you know, President Trump has made a big deal of saving jobs. He said he saved a bunch of jobs at the carrier plant early in his term. They were going to offshore 2,100 jobs. He saved 700 to 800 of them, about a third of them, using $7 million in government subsidies. So he paid for those jobs directly. And then over the next 2 years, they laid off 600 more people. So they laid off almost all the ones that they were going to keep. And then on a final note, you know, working people, especially people of color, have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And that is a very big problem. I think that we need to hold the administration to account for that. And then final point. I'm from New York, and Trump has a consistent record of not paying small businesses that he's partnered with. And it seems like everyone from New York knows somebody who is personally impacted by this. I certainly do. So that doesn't really make me feel like President Trump is looking out for the working class.
All righty, questions for the speaker. Dr. Morgan, is that a question or a speech?
I have thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for all of the speakers that presented in the negative.
All right, this is
Very
one of
simple
them.
question. Who is John Galt? That's it.
I'm not the biggest fan of Ayn Rand, so the ideology that she espouses, I'm very skeptical of. I think that the fact is that the people who believe that they are contributing the most to this country because they are, captains of industry and they move the economy, they underappreciate the infrastructure and all of the benefits that we have created for them with our collectivist streak in terms of building highways, building an education system, building all of these things, building stable institutions that can support their businesses. So if they were to leave the working class behind and create their own island, that island would quickly run out of labor. So I don't think that Randian philosophy is very strong, despite my first name.
I didn't even notice that. Haha, delightful. Okay, further questions, Mr. Pratt.
Yes, Madam Chair, just want to focus on one aspect of a very good speech from Randy. Regarding corporations, certain handful of very prominent and large corporations, that is true, end up paying no taxes. So a two-pronged question. Do you think that's a result
Does he think?
Does the speaker, excuse me, does he think that that is a result of certain loopholes? And part two is, does he think it's important that we have a competitive corporate tax rate to the rest of similar size, westernized, modernized economies? So was there any justification for reducing the corporate tax rate out of a competitiveness point of view?
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly complex issue. There are certainly countries like the Nordic model, which does have a lower corporate tax rate. It has a much higher income tax rate than ours. And these are certainly priorities that we can debate about where these taxes should come from. But I do think that it's possible to offer incentives for corporations to repatriate the money that they make when they're doing business in this country, but calling their headquarters somewhere in Ireland or somewhere in a low tax economy, because there can and should be disadvantages to doing that. And I think money in politics is the overwhelming cause of the sustenance of a system that really creates this disparity in incentives that is driving our money offshore. I think we need to fix that, and it comes through fixing the money in politics issue.
All righty, very good. And with that, the speakers, thanks. Jazz hands for Mr. Liaz, our wonderful California leader. All righty, I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative. And I'd like to call on Mr. Luke Phillips. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I am wont to do whenever I have the opportunity to make a speech, I'm going to be kind of a jerk about the resolution here. I actually am not a huge Trump fan. I find him more of a kind of almost a comic relief kind of element in some ways. But I do think in the long term and in all kinds of historical senses, Trump is actually probably a better thing for America at this particular point, and especially for the plight of working people everywhere in America from all kinds of the American working classes, be they the industrial working classes or the construction and say shipbuilding working classes, or be they the restaurant and service industry working classes. Trump is probably a better thing for them than a lot of us are thinking right now on a lot of ways, in ways that I'd like to express a little bit now. So first off, Trump, I think it is fairly clear, still plays footsies all the time and defers on a lot of policies to the standard market side of the American political right. Some of whose opinions have been aired by various speakers in the affirmative here already tonight. And they are our fellow Americans. They have their right to have a seat at the policy table as much as anybody else. Nobody's arguing against that. That being said, Trump, in his kind of outer borough style and in his fetishization and fantasization of a kind of syndicalist nationalism, is much more open to bringing into the Overton window of how we think about policy things that hadn't been kosher for Republicans to say for 30, 40, even 50 years before 2016. Things like industrial policy, things like tariffs, things like the coordination of private industrial processes with government-directed kinds of research projects, and not just research projects, but production targets, the stuff that looks like state planning, the stuff that looks like not very much free market, but could be economic coordination in the national interest, things that we in America did very well to defeat fascism in the Second World War and to defeat communism over the 40 years of the Cold War, but have ever since 1991 more or less thought is becoming irrelevant. Now, Trump has brought all that stuff back into the Fed, and I know that because while it has been slow to catch up in legislation and even slower to catch up in business parlance, everybody in policy world is buzzing about it. There are a huge number of intellectuals and, more importantly, policy entrepreneurs working in the houses of Congress, working in various departments in the federal government to realign American legislation and American policy being promoted by Republicans on all these kinds of things. Orrin Cass is probably the biggest name on that front, but there are plenty of others. Eli Lilly.
Sorry, you may wrap up. I know that you wanted to speak for 4 minutes, but unfortunately I've got to keep you to 3. Go ahead and unmute though. You're still muted. We can't hear you. We want to hear you.
The things that many of the speakers in the negative on this resolution have argued about the realities of Trump are all completely true. But that being said, the places in which the phenomenon of President Donald Trump is pushing things for the general policy consensus on the American right, I think are beneficial to future compromises between certain elements of the American right and left, which will in turn be further beneficial to a more integrated American economy over the long run that will in the long run serve many more parts of the American people. So apologies for going over my time, Madam Chair.
That's all right. Very good. Are there questions for the speaker? You said such sophisticated things. I hesitate to ask a question. Oh, good. Okay. Len, go ahead. Unmute and ask your question. We need you to unmute, sir.
Madam Chair, the speaker, let's see, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the speaker talks about a great opportunity for compromise between right and left should there be a continued Trump presidency. I know this gets away from the working class, but the question would then be, will there be compromise of any kind between the right and left should there be a continued Trump presidency? In fact, I dare ask, will there really be democracy with a continued Trump presidency?
All right, Mr. Phillips.
Madam Chair, I have long made a hard decision not to make hard predictions on things because I'm often wrong about them, but I am willing to be on the record wagering that democracy will most likely survive in some hucksterous form or another beyond a subsequent election of Donald Trump further into the 2020s. Simply because that is how the vast majority of American institutions are formed. And in terms of why that makes compromise necessary, I think one of the things that we here at Braver Angels don't really address, but I think it's one of the biggest kinds of promoters to depolarization outside of the kind of work we do, is the fact that when factions are hostile and don't believe that the others are legitimate, which frankly is where the mainstream of the American left and right are nowadays. When they're hostile, they fight and fight and fight and fight, and they get into gridlock, they get into deadlock, they get into a state of Cold War, and nothing gets done. And so,
Alrighty. I'm going to have to cut you off, sir. Sorry about that. You can finish your sentence if you really want to, but that sounded like a good place to end to me.
that was a good place to end.
Lovely. Alrighty. And I hate to do this because all of a sudden we have a whole lot of questions, but we're going to have to move on just because we're short on time here. So with that, the speakers thanked. We're also now going to, yeah, jazz hands. Absolutely. We're now going to shorten speeches to 2 minutes, and I'm going to take either 1 or 0 questions in between. I haven't decided yet, just to, there are a number of people who want to speak, and I want to get as many folks in as possible. So I'm looking for a speech in the negative, and I think I will go with Kay Halpern. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I got that right this time. First, I just want to preface my remarks by thanking the speakers in the affirmative, and particularly David and Zach. I really learned a lot from your stories, and I really appreciate hearing your stories. I have 3 points I want to make. That's about centralized socialism, centralized government, healthcare, and taxes. And all of this affects the working class and the rest of the citizens in this country. So to the point that someone like Biden would be worse because he's centralizing government, I grew up part of my childhood in Eastern Europe behind what used to be called the Iron Curtain. And I also studied in Russia back when it was the Soviet Union. So I know what a centralized government is, and I know how that doesn't work. And that is not what Biden and Democrats and progressive and liberal politics is all about. Definitely not. And I would actually go so far as to say that Trump, who has very autocratic tendencies, is actually centralizing power to him alone and actually decimating our checks and balances and the co-equal branches of government, Congress and well, the judiciary, but that is the president's prerogative to make judicial appointments. And he's getting people just beholden to him. And he also speaks like Stalin, calling the press, which is kind of the fourth estate, another check and balance on executive power. He calls the press the enemy of the people. That's straight out of the Soviet dictator's playbook. Going to healthcare, Sharon spoke about waiting under a, quote, socialist economy. And yes, in countries in Western Europe and in Canada, one does wait for healthcare. But what about people that don't have any resources and that don't work, say, don't have a job at a steel mill like Zach and have no healthcare? So is nothing better than waiting, I would ask?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off. You can say your last sentence if you want to. You just have to unmute. Unmute.
Sorry. I didn't get to taxes, but to the point about Obamacare, just very quickly, Obamacare is essentially the same thing as Romney Care, Mitt Romney, who was a former Republican candidate for president. And that was a system that he instituted, a healthcare system that he instituted when he was governor of the state I partially grew up in, Massachusetts. And Obamacare is based on that.
All righty.
I can, if there's time, I can make comments about taxes.
Thank you. So unfortunately, there is not, and I'm just realizing that we're going to run just a little bit over as is, and so I want to go ahead and move ahead. And so with that, the speaker is thanked. I really appreciate, so that speech was one, there have been several really good personal stories here, and I just want to compliment you all on that. That tends to make a debate much better, and so thank you for sharing. I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative, 2-minute speech. Let's go to David Owinski, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to try to reiterate earlier points, but just say one observation that I find in a lot of people when they talk about working class people voting against interests. Most working class people I know, which is the people I'm surrounded by and my family, my loved ones, when they're not looking for endless government programs and handouts and endorsements and entitlements. And then when they vote against it, they're not voting against interest. They're voting for liberty. They're voting for self-responsibility. They'd like their taxes lower because they can pay for these things themselves and make their own decisions. They're not automatons who just can't wait to, suckle on the government, and that if they vote against more government programs, because as Zach pointed out, they know that for every dollar they give out, if they got 90 cents back, it would be miraculous. They get far less. So they'll spend their own money on their own things. They're actually intelligent. They don't need a bunch of elites telling them how to run their life and to tell them that this is what you get. They have their own sense of independent self-worth and self-responsibility. So they're not voting against interest. They're voting for their long-term interest. And I would also say that the notion that they all somehow want to stick it to the rich guys, like tax the rich, stick it to the man. Not the people I know. They understand that a lot of those people are in those positions because they're smart and they're hardworking and they're ingenious, and they want their kids to grow up to be one of those people. They don't necessarily want to pull them down, and they know that money is fungible. It moves around. And if you decide, as people, as the tax base in New York and California is finding out right now, it can go to Florida and Texas, or it can go to Singapore, and it can go to Switzerland, and it can go a lot of places. I think that true, deep respect for working class also means respect for their ability to manage themselves, and that government is not the solution to every problem, and that every little thing that comes up needs a government guy to run in and say, we're going to take care of that mosquito bite for you. They can do it on their own, and they don't have to lose the transfer cost of having it funnel through a program that takes $1 out of their taxes and gives them back 35 cents in value. That's what I wanted to share.
Very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked. No time for questions. Sorry, folks. And so I'm now looking for our final negative speech of the evening. And oh my goodness, there are so many. I'm sorry, folks. We won't be able to get to everybody. I'm going to go with Chuck Stone. Been waiting quite a while. Go ahead, Mr. Stone. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also enjoyed the speeches for the affirmative as well, but I'm very much on the other side. I'm wearing a Donald Trump shirt today in your honor. It has cufflinks, so I actually never wear it anywhere. I didn't know it had cufflinks when I bought it. It was my mistake. And I'm hoping that a lot of Trump supporters will find the same thing, that they bought something in 2016 that it doesn't fit their needs. I think the president described himself this week as being a cheerleader for America. And that was his reason for basically lying to the public about the deadliness of this pandemic. And this is coming out of his mouth. He downplayed it intentionally, although he knew how deadly it was. The problem is that we didn't need a cheerleader. We needed a quarterback to be leading us into this problem, which is a collective problem. And instead of coming up with a plan for testing and for manufacturing what was needed, and for sending out the message to people that we need to protect ourselves and we need to protect each other, instead, as recently as the Republican National Convention, he brought people together by the hundreds to sit at the White House without masks on. in the jobs that I have done, preparation is absolutely necessary. And that's certainly true of the president as well. And yet this is a man who does not read the presidential daily briefings, and who has the people who have worked with him come out of the administration afterwards saying that he is unfit for office. And that's been John Bolton, that's been General Mattis. John Kelly has been supportive of others who have criticized him. And his idea of preparation is that he will look Kim Jong-un in the eyes and he'll be able to tell within 15 seconds whether a deal will be made. And that is just magical, and it is phony, and he is not up to attacking the complex problems that face the working class and really all Americans, such as the...
All right, I think that is an excellent note to end on, and for your speech. And so we're going to stop there. So with that, the speaker is thanked, and jazz hands for Mr. Stone. So something interesting is going to happen now, which is we're technically going to adjourn this debate, but then we're going to do one more thing. So don't go anywhere. But if someone would unmute themselves and say, I move we adjourn, and then someone else would unmute themselves and say second, I'd be very grateful.
I move we adjourn.
Please, there a second? All right. The motion having been moved and seconded, we are adjourned. So that's just a formality because I'm a stickler for parliamentary procedure. One of the thing I want to do now is sometimes the most interesting part of the night, which is I want us all to just take a second, and I'll give you a minute to think. But I'd like everybody to try to answer two questions. What did you learn over the last 2 hours or so, and what did you enjoy? And I want to focus first on what you learned and then on what you enjoyed. And so we'll do this the same way. You don't have to call me Madam Chair necessarily anymore, but if you would just raise your Zoom hand so I can call on you, that would be great. We'll start with Zach. Unmute yourself and share what you learned and what you enjoyed.
I do enjoy this kind of debate. I think that it's lost in the American system nowadays with the two-party system when everybody's debating back, not really even debating, just yelling at each other. No one's listening. All of my opinions on religion, politics, whatever, have come from finding other people and saying, what do you think about this? And then listening, seeing what they've got to say and being like, hey, yeah, you know what, that's better than my idea. So I'm going to, flip my idea around and, get something better. I'm just sad to see that there's a two-party system and it's not just, America. It's us versus them, red versus blue. Like I said, I think it's sad to see, and that's why I like stuff like this, where I can listen to the other side. They'll say something, and I'll look it up and think about it, rethink, is that okay? You know what I mean? So that's just really all I had to say for my little 2-minute or whatever thing is, It's good to see people doing debates and joining together and doing like how America was founded. Guys got together and said, hey, what do you think about revolution? So
exactly.
That's all I have to say.
Revolution, that's what we're about, totally.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, all right. I'd like to go to, so I'm noticing some of our speakers, and I'm just gonna remind folks, because sometimes this happens, that this is not a period for speeches or making sort of final points, although it's very tempting. Yeah, so what did you learn or what did you enjoy? And we will go to Len. Go ahead, Len.
Hi, I really appreciated learning from those here who are who are working class, like I guess Zach, David, and Nick, and I guess 2 of you are affirmative, 1 negative, but all of you, I'm in a bubble. I really live in this bubble, and I'm seeing that just more and more. And even though I'm anti-Trump, but I'm relatively independent aside from that. Anyhow, I really like the opportunity to get out of my bubble, and I appreciate what I learned from all of you.
Absolutely, yeah.
3 of you.
All right. Mary Jo, what did you learn or what did you enjoy?
Yeah, I learned a lot from the speakers who are working class blue collar workers, which I really appreciated. I could guess I'm white collar. You can see my computer behind me there that I work on all day. And I have a brother who's a union president, but politics is not allowed in our family. So I loved hearing those perspectives so I can understand his perspective.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah. Kay Halprin.
Yeah, I just want to say that I really, really appreciate the stories, particularly of David and Zach, and especially when David at this latest talk that he gave about explaining about how voting for Trump is not voting against my interest. And about how the stock market in his earlier speech was important to the working class because of 401k, and the points that Zach made about pensions versus 401k and just being open-minded. I am so appreciative. Thank you very much.
All right. Jeremy Stearns.
Thanks. Yeah, just really appreciative of everybody's effort. You know, it's really, this is a real pleasure to do this. It's also at the same time very difficult. It's one of those things that's a pleasure from the difficulty. You know, I think, you know, if I had more time, there's a bunch of things, but I think the one thing I had in mind to say is, I feel like we're all working class in a sense. You know, I'm not even sure exactly what the definition of working class is. But somehow I'm not sure if I would qualify because I work in the information economy, but I'm an entrepreneur. Again, more time for another time, but I feel like this is all hard work. We're all doing hard work here, trying to figure this out, and it takes effort. And I just think that we all have that in common, that we are really working. If you're here, you're really working on something important. So thanks
Absolutely.
for that.
I love that, and jazz hands for everybody for that point, for real. This is a lot easier said than done, especially this time of year and this year of all, you know, in the election cycle. Morgan, go ahead.
I enjoyed the speaker who talked about Trump kind of shaking some things loose in the policy world. If there's anything, if before the 2016 election, if there was anything that I liked about the idea of a Trump presidency, it was maybe him being a force of some sort of creative destruction. And it makes me, give me a little bit of good feeling that maybe there is some benefit coming from that, that power of his.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. So that was new for you. Gary. Gary P., go ahead and unmute. You're still muted, sir. There you go.
Now I'm unmuted, right? Oh, this is my first time to ever join one of these things. And I decided I wanted to join one of these because I believe our country is so divided, and there's a passion that goes along with our division. And it seems like when I was younger, we were to discuss politics, as much division and passion as there is now. I've learned for the past 20 years that I can disagree with friends and respect them and like them. And I often find that people I meet and get to know and really like if we talk politics, I find out they have politics that I stand. So that's the reason I joined here. That's not something I learned. I didn't, I came here. I don't like Donald Trump. I did hear y'all say some things that I probably need to check into, that more policy changes he's made that I'm really not educated to. Because I get so fixated on his character, on his personality, on his misinformation, that those are the things that I have cared about. And I get, so I don't really study what kind of change he's made. If he's doing anything beneficial,
I think
I don't know about it. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny. I think you're
But
not
I
muted,
can
and
show
this is
respect to
just
those of you who
still
I
going.
disagree with.
So,
and I hope you show me respect.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. Jazz hands for sure. Alrighty, we're gonna go Rose, Thomas, and then David really quick, and then we will wrap up.
Yeah, I wanted to thank all of the speakers, but especially the pro-Trump speakers. I personally did not vote for him and don't plan to vote for him, but I am surrounded by a family of very rabid pro-Trump people, and I'm trying to understand why they could possibly believe that, and to hear some people articulate reasons that aren't based on he's sent by God, everything he says is true, has been very, very helpful to me, so thank you.
Alrighty, great. Thomas.
Yes, I also want to thank all the speakers, and it's just very refreshing to be able to have a platform where we can speak openly about how we feel without feeling persecuted or the need to defend ourselves. We can just have an open discourse and learn something. I've certainly learned quite a bit. This is certainly something you don't get from the news media.
That's for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. And we'll I can't call in quite everybody, which is a good thing, right? Like more of you want to say good things than we actually have time for. We'll end with David Owinski, and then there'll be one more thing. So don't go anywhere. David, go ahead.
I want to thank all the speakers and all the participants. And I love Braver Angels and have been participating for a while because it's one of the few places where passionate opinions can be expressed and received with sincerity, courtesy, and civility. I learn a lot every time, mostly from people that I disagree with on policy, but I truly appreciate their passion for their beliefs and their courtesy and civility when I'm expounding on mine. And I think that we honestly represent the best of America. We don't always agree, but we can agree to have a civil, courteous discourse. And I'm so grateful that Braver Angels exists.
Yeah. So glad to hear that. Thank you all for being here. I found tonight's debate really illuminating and inspiring, and I learned a lot at this one. I do a lot of these, and so I just want to say thank you to everybody who was part of this. And with that, tell us how we can be better, join our ranks, become a Braver Angel, and have a great evening. Take care, everybody.